Paladin Ashley here, and today we're going to be talking about diversity in gaming. And I have with me Angelique, and she is also a fellow gamer and cosplayer, and she wants to kind of help this conversation, add to this conversation of diversity in gaming, and just kind of give her own perspective on it. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. So this is not an interview. This is a little bit different than what we normally do. I normally interview people and I kind of keep my opinions to myself, but this is more of a conversation as per her request, which I'm really excited about. So let's just dive into it. So you researched Gamergate recently, just very, very recently. We both kind of I had to do a refresher because it was several years ago that it happened.
So with Gamergate, yeah, I didn't realize that I've already been exposed to it and that I may not have known the full details of where it had began, but just seeing the backlash and the after effects of the hashtag, I recognized it right away. It's one of those like you're able to put a name on it, but you just didn't know what to call it before. And once I looked into it, it took me just a couple of sites, and it was very interesting to see that it's everyone has their very, very validated right to feel this way on wanting games to have like a sense of traditional feel to it. I'm only confused as to what is considered traditional with gaming, since it does come in so many different styles. It's based off of many stories, and it's hard to say what traditional is when you have such a broad spectrum to play on. So I think gaming is purely subjective rather than objective. And, if we're going to say that, games should be kept in a traditional sense, that might only have to pertain to a certain time period, because games in the past compared to games now have an arguable sense of traditionalism due to the amount of like mature content that's presented in games these days. And the only thing I get a sense of right away is, some people just don't want that sense of reality in video games. And that's from my understanding, because I've even had debates with people, in person, online, just seeing debates online of how games shouldn't be changed so much and characters shouldn't be changed so much to appeal or to appease just like a small demographic. But I think a really good beginning to creating more stories and bringing more originality to the gaming entertainment side of the industry. Gamergate was it's a deep sigh. And you're just,
oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Some cute rabbit hole to go down.
Oh yeah, no, that's a deep rabbit hole. And I think that the people, you know, no offense to anyone who is sane, which is, watching this, but there were so many people involved in that scandal. It was, it was a controversy. I remember Gamergate happening, like when it was happening, it was so terrifying to read about the articles and stuff. It was like right after, it was like the tail end of it happening. But I remember it happening, and I remember just reading the accounts from these game developers who were being harassed because honestly, because they were women. It really, there's no other reason as to that I could think of as to why they were so vehemently abused, doxxed, all of that stuff. There were the two developers that were really hit the worst from this. They actually had to flee their houses because they were doxxed, and then a couple of people were saying things like, on my way with a knife, things like that were actually being said to them. And it was just really, really terrifying, for these women. And it kind of, I think that Gamergate I personally think that, and you can, share what you think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it had a ripple effect on the way that women in these industries, that are traditionally male oriented industries, that how they came forward about this kind of abuse, this sort of toxicity they experience online. Like I think that it did. I think it made a lot of people scared to speak out about stuff like this.
I agree. I think also it kind of opens the notion of how many games became popular from a female's creative development. You know, like whoever came up with the design and layouts,
Hmm.
backstory,
Yeah.
configurations. Like, how do we not know that a woman had created this, and then somebody else took the credit? Not that I'm saying in any kind of way that men aren't creative, and
Right.
the
Of
the
course.
big popular names that are out now, they're undeserving of their titles. I'm not saying that at all. It's just
Right.
now seeing that there are a significant amount of women in the gaming industry,
Yes.
and they are experiencing a lot of
Mhm.
hatred and verbal abuse towards them. It's really sad because at the end of the day, that's really what it is. It just comes down to them being women, and we're still dealing with the residual effects of people just wanting women to kind of just sit still and look pretty, kind of a
Mhm.
thing.
Yes.
And it's not acceptable these days anymore. And that's why you're seeing a lot more changes to characters and games, and how things are being made with
Yeah.
being much more accurate and showing women as more than just objects. It's
Yes.
really unfortunate that they did have to pretty much go into hiding just because of those very interesting people that are online. I've seen like the screenshots where
Yeah.
even one was like, it has nothing to do with you being a woman, and then he calls the woman a cunt, which everyone
Which,
knows that derogatory term is used towards women. So it's
right.
just like, you just
Yes.
it's not about women, but you're going to say something derogatory about a woman. Like, it just, none of
Right.
it, you can tell that there it was a lot of the arguments that the those people were making were very nonsensical. So
Yeah.
I think for me, coming in the perspective of, I'm African American, I grew up in the South, like I've seen and heard pretty much everything when it comes to racism and sexism.
Yeah.
So I'm unfortunately like desensitized. So I'm reading it and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, it's halfway expected to hear and to see those kinds of words, even
Right.
towards women who aren't of color. It's like, yeah, well, you're still considered like in a part of a minority demographic. So these
Mhm.
are things that we all have to kind of hurdle over.
Right.
Gamergate still kind of, I think in a sense, the mentality it's still there, but it is getting a lot better. And I did
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that, um, like Josh Whedon, I'm not sure how to say his last name, how he did come to the defense of the game developer, and was backing
Mhm.
her up. Like, that's really nice to see, because you do need those allies who can help us get over these hurdles and stop this kind of abuse online and in reality too.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it does happen in reality, but of course, it's something that if you're not a part of that demographic, it's difficult for people outside, with privilege to understand what's happening. You know what I mean? And I'm saying this knowing that I have a great deal of privilege in today's society, you know what I mean? Just being white, you know what I mean? And I understand that, but it's so difficult if you're not someone who believes victims, to believe that this is even happening if it's not happening to you. I mean, there's really no way to convince someone in that mentality. They really have to have an open mind to even believe that this goes on, because I find that the people that don't believe that Gamergate was a big deal or that support it or anything like that, they don't see the damage of a lack of diversity in media, because media is powerful, and they'll argue that media is powerful when they think that they can push a conspiracy or an agenda from the media. You know what I mean? They typically do. But then media isn't so powerful when it comes to giving a voice to people who are voiceless in the media. It's all based on what argument they're having at the time, and it's very difficult to work with something like that. If we don't have a base, firm, solid definition of, is media powerful or is it not? That's the basis of the argument, is like, should media remain unchanging because, some this small, loud minority of people really feel like it needs to remain unchanging? Or are we going to actually look at how it impacts people of color, people who are, you know, females, anyone who has not had a whole lot of representation, you know, in media before and is now
Right.
having it, you know, are we going to keep the status quo for that loud out those loud outcriers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you know, it's just, or are we going to embrace the fact that it is powerful and needs to be used, you know, for this good purpose? You know, even if the agenda behind adding more diversity to video games, to movies, is to make money, you know, I mean, even if that's the only reason why it's happening, it's still doing a lot of good, in my opinion. And so it should be supported. But that's where I stand on it.
Right.
I, you know,
It's a definite start. That also comes to the fact, or not the fact, but the question of the usage of a person of color or a person who identifies as a certain gender or
yes.
anything. How is this character being used? Because in my opinion, what my best friend and I've talked about was, you know, now that we're going into 2020, with the span of the decade, you can see a lot of film, movies, video games that have all kinds of people as the main character or supporting characters, writers, producers, directors, creators of all types of backgrounds. How what I see is the problem that we probably will be going into, and hopefully it'll get resolved in the next decade, is not like lack of representation, but lack of proper representation. Because it's going
Yes.
to take a lot more than just having a certain person of color or a certain person who identifies a certain way in a role. Like we need to be able to properly and accurately portray them in the situations, the stories that they're in, because even though the entertainment industry, whether that be film, television, or games, it is overall, in my opinion, used as a distraction for the general population. It's basically a versatile form of escapism that gives many people the false sense of entitlement. And that's where Gamergate comes into play. It's that
Yeah.
false sense of entitlement that for so long, it's like you've been catered to, and now you got somebody else coming in and getting a piece of that
Yes.
that spot, and it gets a little that if it's up to some people it might be too much, basically like claustrophobic.
Yeah.
I think this overuse of escapism, it does connect to uh, like somebody using their emotions through transference, which is just projecting their emotions onto someone else or to something else, especially since a lot of people viscerally live their lives through characters so they can have some sense of control. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, pretty known that our generation has a really high number of, you know, like depression. You know,
Mm,
we've seen that growing up, and you know, you go into video games is it is, and I even do it. I love playing video games. I played video games since I was like, I don't know, maybe like 5 is like the earliest memory I can
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And it's fun. You know, you get to move away from the things that you deal with in reality. And then once, you know, reality is integrated into that fantasy, some people are going to feel threatened. They're going to feel that now whatever they were able to let out and to vent on and express in a fantasy world, now that's going to show consequences in reality. You know, you can't just use these these forms of, like I keep saying, escapism, because it's really what it is,
Hmm.
as a way to go and, you know, like hurt anybody else or to marginalize anybody else and not
Yeah.
think something's going to happen. You know, if it's
Right.
going to be a fantasy, let it just be something for everybody, not just something for someone. There's still a big
Right.
issue with representing, you know, Black people in the fantasy genre in general. There's still not a lot of, you know, elves and, you know, mermaids, centaurs, and things like that. Like
Yeah.
we want to see that, but
Yes.
it's kind of hard to, you know, break the mold when the media does tend to put us in a bit of a box. It's a lot better now. It really is a lot
Yeah.
better, but we still have a long ways to go. Um, I think, you know, times are changing, and inclusion and accuracy of characters, it it's going to be still a bit of a debate, but
Yeah.
it's getting better.
Absolutely.
I know Resident Evil 2 has had a remake, and I did see the gameplay.
Yeah.
I don't have a console anymore, so I just watch gameplays now. But I did love the fact that the female characters were much more like their outfits were very similar to the male counterparts. It wasn't
Right.
just, short shorts and big breasts hanging out like
Yeah.
that's not armor. That's not going to do anything in these,
Yes.
survival situations. So I really love the fact that they are making these female characters people. They're
Yes.
in pants, they're in shoes, they're in t-shirts,
Yeah.
they're, getting scruffed up the way the men are. And
Yeah.
I like that sense of realism because I don't like it when it's too, I guess the best way I can put it is like back then how they, like I said, they weren't covered up. Even when I was a kid, it didn't make sense to me. It was just
Yeah.
nonsense. I was like, how is she like taking these hits? I don't get
Right.
it. And then
Yeah.
now I get to see the thing that I've been longing for is that, the proper representation of these
Yes.
characters. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm still, Gamergate is still just one of those, like, I see what they mean when you don't want too much change, only in the sense of, I've talked to somebody about how it would be great to see new characters being made. I don't want to see the
Yeah.
same storylines being rebooted and being remade when you have the opportunity to create something new and create someone new that can then be used for, the targeted audience. I really
Yes.
don't want to see like another Batman video game or like another, Superman movie kind of a thing when
Mhm.
there's comic book wise, there's so many other characters that we can touch on. And
Absolutely.
I think that's another issue too with keeping the same stories going. It gives that it kind of protects the creators to keep having like the same type of people in the forefront because you're
Yeah.
trying to respect the integrity of the story that you're pulling from. But to me, I feel
Yeah.
like it's a scapegoat to um, keep up with that self entitlement.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing is it's, they often, decry this is ruining my immersion because it's, bringing politics into video games. But if it's ruining your immersion, then that's really interesting because it kind of makes you wonder, okay, well then what about these people's immersion? They can't actually project themselves onto any characters because none of them look like them or act like them or are relatable in any way to them. So what about their immersion? You know what I mean? Like you have to really think about that. It's like everyone's reality, everyone's perspective is different. And so our escapism similarly is going to be different, and it requires, like you said, more realistic representations, not just representations of these characters, but realistic representations of these, people groups, of these demographics. And so, like an example, and it makes me, it's going to kind of probably delve into a different topic, but similar. A different thread anyway, is I remember one of the worst representations I saw was when I played Final Fantasy 13, and they do have a person of color, and oh my God, is that a stereotype? Like they just, oh my gosh, that's offensive. Like it was just so awkward. Like
Yep.
playing made me uncomfortable. I was like, oh my God, that is not a real person. No one
It's totally
like
fine for games
that.
that have like an awkward level, but don't go that way of awkward and uncomfortable. Like we
It
can
was
skip
so
that.
weird. Yes, and I wanted to like Final Fantasy 13 because I loved lightning. I still do. I still love lightning. But
Mhm.
oh my God, were almost all of the other characters really annoying and just two-dimensional. But that one just straight up offensive. And the thread that I was going to go down is it makes me wonder, is, the lack of representation just a lot of it can stem from the fact that so much of our gaming development globally happens in Japan and in East Asia, where there really isn't a whole lot of representation because they have more homogenous societies over
Mhm.
there. So there's really not a whole lot of diversity. They don't really have experience in dealing with it. So that,
Right.
if there is any sort of an excuse as to why it still hasn't really spread like it should have already at this point, in a developed society, that's to me, I believe is one of the reasons potentially. So what are your thoughts on that, if I can ask? Like,
No,
so
I'm actually so I learned Japanese for about 2.5 years, and then now I've been teaching my kids, and I'm self-taught with Korean, but I've grown up around um, people of like from East Asia.
mhm,
I'm very comfortable with that like that style of like Asian culture, so
great.
it makes sense. Like for you can actually see like for centuries and like some of those places thousands of years, like you said, they're homogenous. Like they really know their culture and their people, so they can make all the characters they want in that
Yeah,
fashion. So it's true. Like there's not a lot of people of color in those countries versus like here in North America. So no, it makes sense. And I've even met people from like other countries like Australia and European countries, and including Asian countries. Their perception of Americans and some people of color, mainly Americans though, is from Western media. So
yes,
whatever they develop their character off of is coming from our media source in the
yeah,
way the people here are being portrayed. So yeah, there's going to be stereotypes. There's going to be things where like, oh my God, we don't dress like that no more. We don't talk like that no more. Like
right.
that was back in the 80s and
Yes.
90s.
Oh my
Years,
gosh.
they just don't have that exposure. And it's not the same as, you can't just go on YouTube and you can't Google, you know, characteristics of a Black person or anything like that, just as an example, because we're
Yeah.
all so different.
Yes.
You have to just interact with the people and you got to talk to them, be around them, see them in different situations, see how their personality really shines. So I totally understand that like, yeah, East Asian countries are not going to have the most accurate portrayal,
Right.
but it's getting better. We're I know there are like still a lot of Black people that are coming over, like starting to travel more. We're getting
Mhm.
exposed to other cultures. That's me personally. That's what I'm basing my career on, is just basically being a cultural liaison so that I can use myself to break down those stereotypes. So whenever it comes to anybody wanting to like create characters for any form of entertainment, they'll have a much more realistic
Yeah.
blueprint to go off of.
Right.
Um, so like I can't get really mad at them because of that reason. Like it's only up until like I don't even know how many years now that foreigners are going to their country. I
Yeah.
just have little patience for here in North America, where I'm like,
Right.
we've been a melting pot. We know how people act here. There's no excuse for any kind of marginalization of
Yeah.
your own freaking citizens. So I mean, hopefully,
Absolutely.
where we're gonna. I've seen even it's like that in anime. It's gotten a little bit better. There's there, oof, anime back in the day.
That's
It's
that's a
getting better.
totally different topic, but so true.
But I think
Yeah.
like they'll listen to what people have to say and they make the necessary changes. I think for me, what also baffles me is how the internet was highly in agreement on the way the Sonic the Hedgehog character was designed for the movie, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's like, that's not how he's supposed to look. What
Hmm.
is this? I'm not spending my money on that. And
Yeah.
then they recreated, they did a re-imaging of him, and now it's better. I'm trying to see that kind of energy projected from, those who would associate themselves in that. I'm just gonna just generalize it, but that Gamergate
Yeah.
controversy, basically.
Yeah.
Like, okay, sure, you want a sense of traditionalism, but you need to make sure like whatever you're doing, it needs to be accurate. It's got to
Yeah.
make sense, because you can't just BS a character and think people are going to spend money on it. Like, no, no, no
Absolutely.
one's working 40 hours plus a week or anything like that to spend their money on something so ridiculous. So I really think I want people just to have that open-mindedness of, okay, we need to change. Doesn't mean we have to you, get rid of our identity, Just,
Yeah.
let's merge it and see where we go from there. It's just, it's those comments I read it wasn't surprising. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that's also what has me nervous about even trying to like start what you're doing, like a podcast, YouTube,
Uh-huh.
because of even just
Yeah.
in normal conversations, you get a lot of backlash
Yes.
on how much do you know? Like just me
Right.
being a female is enough for somebody to look at me and think like you don't have the credentials. Then
Yeah.
it can cause a lot of insecurities for people to want to create a game and create a character and share it with the world because they're going to be fearful of that kind of reaction.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, and I think that what you said about like the East Asian representation kind of being a reflection, I think that is so true. A reflection of the ideas that we're putting out. They do, at least when it comes to this subject of, diversity. And so personally, I think that that's a really great case for, yes, there are still stereotypes in our media because look at the stuff that's being produced over there is a reflection of what they're seeing us produce. So if they're
Mhm.
coming out with these ridiculous stereotypes, surely they're not doing it necessarily. I mean, sometimes there definitely could be racists over there as well, especially because they're homogenous. Yes, that happens, absolutely. But they don't always intend to be offensive when they're trying to put a person of a different color in their games. You know what I mean? If they're trying to put like a black person in the games, if that ends up being very stereotypical, we have to like kind of look at ourselves and go, what are we putting out, that's making this example for other cultures, to represent this way. That's, I think, incredibly insightful. I love that point. By the way, quick question. So you been I mean you learned Japanese and I think that's awesome. I'm trying to learn, but it's a slow process. I know conversationally, I know like a conversational Japanese, this is a total tangent, but I'm just curious. Um have you been or would you like to at some point go to Japan someday? Do you have any aspirations for that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to save up and get my passport. I was actually supposed to go to Korea this October, and I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks, but just life happens, and you use the money to move over to our side of town where we both live, and hopefully next year I'll be able to go travel. I was pretty decent with my speech, but I hadn't used it. So, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
It's also up there. I have like a weird, if there's anything I'm good at, and I know this sounds like I am, toot my own horn, but
Please
like
way.
foreign is my niche. Like being able to learn a language and understand it is extremely easy for me because I was taking AP Spanish 4 while I'm taking Japanese, and it was just like
Wow.
nothing. Like I could go in and out of Spanish, English, and Japanese with other students. I go out in and out of Korean and English with my kids occasionally. Um, I don't bombard them too much because my kids are 3 and 6, so they're they gotta catch on to English more than I introduce them to anything else. But like it's a lot of fun for me. I do want to go. Hopefully, I can start next year with Korea because there's so many big plans that I have for that. And like I said,
Yeah.
I'm trying to just basically make myself be a cultural liaison, which is
Yeah.
something that my best friend and I were going to be like coming up with a podcast and talking about because he's black, and we're going to have our opinion on so many things. But I'm really excited. Like I have a best friend. Her family's from Thailand. I grew up with them. Like my mom's best friends. Um, they the one's half Japanese, one's Korean. I've known them since I was a kid, and just like also from my dad, he's African American too, but um, he I got like I get a lot of it from him too, from like the movies we together, and my video game started like love for video games started with my dad because that was like our way of bonding. He wasn't the type to like, be super, super playful. So the way that we bonded was like through video games. It was like, hey, you want to go play Resident Evil 2? And that was like a thing for us. But it's just been like it's kind of shaped my personality entirely. So I want to start going to those countries and really see it. Um, it's I'm so excited.
That is
Oh,
awesome. Oh my gosh, that's exciting. So that's a good question. So what was the first video game that you remember getting? Was it Resident Evil that first got you
well,
into video
I
games
think
or
the very first video game I could think of would have been Doom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
That
remember Doom, and I remember I might think the next one would have been House of the Dead. I remember just
mhm.
being over at my uncle's house, and that's on my dad's side, and they would play video games. And I for sure remember Doom, where it's, you got your little the guy's face like right at the bottom of the screen, and that was your health bar, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
and I've just been playing video games ever since. The last actual video game I played was The Evil Within.
Mm.
Um, that was a lot of fun. And then now what I usually do is I just watch gameplay walkthroughs since I
Yeah,
don't have like the time to play it. And I don't have a console to play it on either. But
right,
I
right.
I, I keep up with the gameplays and I keep up with development. So most of the time I'll be watching a game go from, beta phase all the way up until their launch, like online. And I just keep up with it. Even if it takes 2, 3 years, like I try to stay on top of it
So
whenever I
cool.
can between work and kids.
So then I have a question for you. Okay, so I think first to answer in case viewers are wondering, I think the first game I remember playing was actually Duck Hunt. It's like so long ago.
Uh,
I was like probably like 5 or 6. Like you said, it's like a similar age. I still remember that. That was oh my gosh, nostalgia. But I remember being at my grandparents' house and my brother, of course, he did the thing too where like he would often like unplug the controller and be like, "Oh, you're doing so great." Like, as
Mm,
I still remember that, and I'm looking back now, and I'm like, son of a. Anyways,
yes.
but
That's
I was, yeah, I know. He was nice. He was nice at one point. I'm just kidding. He's fine now. So, so yeah, but I do remember that, and I was going to ask you, um, so do you have like a favorite video game now, um, a current like favorite just overall? Yeah.
the uh my favorite video game.
Yes. Or series, even if it's like more than one, or like if you have several and it's hard to choose, feel free to list them.
I am so stubborn with this though. Because I've been playing Resident Evil since I was a kid, that's always
Right.
my go-to. So I
Okay.
freaking love the heck out of that game.
Mhm.
Um, I played the second one. I can't remember if I played the first one. I remember
Mm.
I remember playing the second one and beating that, and then Resident the Nemesis Resident Evil 3. I played a little bit of Code Veronica, and I just oh yeah, 4, 5, and 6. Haven't had a chance to play 7, but I've seen the walkthrough. Like I keep up with that religiously. Like that is
Yeah.
my favorite. But that's because I'm a huge fan of the zombie genre. And like
Oh
if
yeah.
I'm reading a book, if it's not like a sappy romance novel, then I'm reading like a like super gory, zombie novel. So my book collection is really weird. But I love zombies. I feel like there's a lot that you can do with them.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other like conversation as because I had somebody ask me like, why are you so obsessed with zombies? And I was just like, man, if you got the time. But it Resident Evil. I would say the next would probably be Silent Hill. I'm a big like horror fan in general, um,
Nice. Cool.
but again so definitely survivor horror. But I like Resident Evil a lot because the puzzles in the game. I love puzzle games.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I've gotten into the game Limbo. That was fun,
Oh,
where it was like the 2D, and you just got to figure out how to get from point A to point B.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Nightmares is another one that I like a lot too. It's just
Oh, yeah.
I love anything
Nightmares.
that'll get you
It's
thinking.
terrifying.
My kids will stuff with me too. Like I thought that I could use it as an excuse to get like alone time with the TV, but then they'll just plop themselves like right next to me on the couch or on the bed, and they're like, "So what game are you watching, Mom?"
That is so
And
cute.
just they're into it just as much as I am. And
Yeah.
they're they're fine. Like we took them to Fright Fest and they freaking loved it because
Oh,
of the
wow.
yes, they had like the greatest time when it comes to Halloween, and I think it's because like they watch the horror walkthrough video games, and they're just like, oh, this is scary, and this is like a thrill for them. And I'm just waiting for somebody, to call child services.
I mean,
Oh,
no, kudos to them, kudos to you, because I cannot do horror. Like, oh my gosh, I just do. I just get so spooked. But I have so much respect for people who can. Like, if you can sit down and play BioShock and like not have a heart attack, I have so much respect for you. Because that game, like games like that are just everything that I'm terrified by. And so I
I
can't like
love
immerse myself in it.
so just like we were talking about, like that's why I keep saying like games are just basically versatile forms of escapism because I know in reality I got too much damn sense to put myself in a dangerous situation just to see what happens. So I'm gonna
So
play a video game and just kind of like live that moment through there where it's
yeah,
a controlled environment and I know I'm not gonna get hurt. And
yeah,
it's just it doesn't take I'm not gonna say like nothing scares me because like there's some stuff that I would squeal at, but
yeah,
I do love the rush of watching something scary, especially in the video games. Movies don't do it to me too much, but for some
right.
reason I think video game does because I'm in control, and
Yes.
whatever actions I make, there is going to be an immediate consequence or a
Oh
later
yeah.
one, and so like I like that rush that you get out of it. So.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
It
for sure. Like a
if
roller
it
coaster.
makes me scream, then it's like a favorite of mine.
Oh wow. Oh wow. For me, my favorites are always like fantasy RPGs. Like right now I'm playing through Witcher 3 and that's definitely one of my favorite games now. My favorite of all time though is still Dragon Age Inquisition. And that is a game that has a lot of diversity in terms of like sexual orientation at least and like,
Okay.
sexualities and things. That they have a little more diversity too, in that they do have more people of color than I'd say most fantasy games do, because a lot of times they just go full Tolkien and like for some reason everyone's white and it's like doesn't make any sense. But they do have, at least some, like they have like a Hispanic nation and things like that. So there's at least some more, for sure, which is refreshing. And I just, oh my gosh. And for me, that helps with immersion. I mean, it's it makes me feel weird when like everyone is white and I'm like, I just don't feel like this is a real place. But anyway, so just personally, that's just me. But yeah, that has to be my all-time favorite is Dragon Age Inquisition. I just love it. It's one of those two where it's a BioWare game, so you get to make your own decisions, and it just really helps with immersion. Like I love that. Um,
Uh, I need to get more into games like those because, yeah, like, there's not a lot of I don't even know. I'd have to look into it more with games, but like I'm not sure if there is like a game with like all like a majority of Black people.
right.
Um, the way I see video games is just like that's another thing too. Like I judge a game off of its backstory.
Hmm.
Because I even like Five Nights at Freddy's, even though the concept is extremely simple, but the lore behind the whole thing is so like complex that I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
But go to because I do love Resident Evil, and there is like one Black character that I can think of, and that was in Resident Evil 2. But to me, it's just I'm thinking of it like, oh, this is a story, and these are the characters, and that's just how it's written. Um,
Yes.
the only times I really pay attention and might have criticism is when they make a character like they try to be inclusive, and then
Yeah.
that's when and pick up on like, okay, we don't do that, or so and so doesn't do that. I did like the way that even in the '90s Resident Evil 2 and in the remake,
Hmm.
they still did a good job with their one Black character that they had. The cop, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he didn't have like a stereotypical accent or anything like that. He was just like a normal dude, and I really liked it. And I like the way that they show it, um, how they every time I did see somebody Black in their games, it was normal. I will say
Yeah.
Resident Evil 5 where they had it based in Africa, that had a lot of backlash because it was
Oh,
people. I've seen like comments online where people are trying to say like this is just getting away with, trying to, kill a bunch of black people. But
oh,
they did have like, yeah, like I remember when that came out and it was a little bit of like a hot topic at the time.
oh,
And it's weird because I feel like it makes it like, yeah, like it's Africa. You're going to be around a lot of Africans. That makes sense.
yeah,
Just like in Resident Evil 4, where he was in that like small little country that looked like, 17th century Prague kind of a thing. Everyone
yeah,
looked like they were from that general area.
yeah,
And it was a little crazy at first with that one coming out. But now the only complaint is that the game
yeah,
itself wasn't that great. And then I, every like by the time it got to the part where Chris Redfield had to punch a damn boulder, everyone forgot about the predominantly black villains. They were just like, okay, now this is just like that game had so many issues. But I remember that one causing like a bit of a stir online. Like it
yeah,
was a way for people to get away with, I guess like releasing some form of like racism, but I never got that feel. I never got that
yeah,
vibe from the game. I've just understood like, okay, that's just where they have it. Prefer it not to be like that because it didn't really show, and this goes into the proper representation. Like, it didn't show Africa as like this beautiful and industrial like
yeah,
continent. I can't even remember like what country they were supposed to be in.
yeah,
They just kind of had like everyone's in villages, everyone's in shacks, like everyone's like in this shanty town kind of a thing. And
yeah,
I guess it's supposed to be, creepy and it's this secret bioweapon, so you got to do it on the bad side of town. But it was just, it had a little bit more cons than pros. So
right,
that's, yeah, like that's like, are people of color being depicted accurately? Highly debatable in that one. And
yeah,
the
yeah,
game overall wasn't that good. It finally redeemed itself in Resident Evil 7. And it's almost like back when they went to a predominantly white character list with like one character again. Like I guess that's just the ratio that works for them. But and
they can do
I feel
one.
like this
They can
sounds
do
like
one
an
right.
asshole so bad. Like I don't want to like, basically like talk out of my ass, but it's just something that
Yeah.
I know. It's just a little interesting. Sip
No,
on
that's
tea.
very, no, and that's on topic. I mean, like, you're doing great. No, that's awesome. For sure. No, I mean, like that's a game that, had controversy for having more, people of color in it, but for kind of the wrong reason, maybe almost a little bit exploitative. Um, for sure. And I do want to ask, okay, so this is just a quick side thing because I don't get a whole lot of opportunities to talk to gamers. And so it's just, especially like female gamers, it's just, I just don't know very many personally that are as, interested in this topic, aside from just casually playing as I am. And so I wonder if you know about like the controversies and stuff happening with Fallout 76. Have you heard about that fiasco? And
Haven't yet.
so yeah, so it's just hilarious. Like it's like a train wreck and it's just amazing and it's hilarious to like just see what's happening. Like I do genuinely feel bad for the gamers who are stuck with it, but I will send you a hilarious rundown of like most of what happened with it and I'll link it to you for sure. But yeah. Anyway, but that's just a little just a little side note. I thought that you would get a kick out of it, so I'm going to send you a thing. But anyway, but back to the topic at hand. So in terms of diversity, like, do you have any, let's say, suggestions? If I know there's so much, like, there's no way to like kind of narrow it down to like one thing that needs to be done. But oh, you know what? Better question, a better way to phrase this is: do you feel that that the gaming industry would benefit from having just from hiring more writers, that actually have lived these experiences, and personally, I feel that that would absolutely be the case. And second question, do you feel that that it is, this is a little more controversial, but do you feel that it is required for someone to write a person that is not of their demographic, right, of the same demographic? Do you feel that should not be a thing? Do you feel like it should only be that people, let's say like people of color should write people of color, or do you feel like anyone can write anything as long as they do their research? So those are two questions. I'm sorry. Like throwing
You're good. I would say, as far as gamers and their companies, and if they're wanting to create characters from certain backgrounds, um, and even if you want to create a character from a certain background,
So the first question was like, yeah, if the gaming industry would benefit from having more people of color and people of, diverse backgrounds in their writing staff. And then the second question is that a requirement though to write people of color to actually be a person of color, for example?
I think it does help whenever, like, it'd be really easy for me to write an African American character. Now, some people might even argue that because I just so happen to be light skinned and there's a thing called like light skin privileges. That's a
Mhm.
whole other conversation. But
Right.
um, even if you have a person of that demographic on the writing team, you'd have to have several of them from different backgrounds because
Yeah.
me being Black in Texas and growing up in the South of the United States might not be the same as somebody who is Black from, like Northern California or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's a
Absolutely.
bit more, mixed. Or some,
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna, write about those things, you would need somebody like have those people be also vastly different from each other because it's still a spectrum. We all don't have the same experiences and we all don't react in the same way to these experiences.
Right. Of
So
course.
it would be very beneficial, but it's also within my community's responsibility to promote more writers and creators in this field.
Mhm.
That's also like a whole other topic too,
Yeah.
where you like in general speaking, like you want to open more doorways and more opportunities and more roads for, anybody that's of color. We don't want to, kind of funnel them into certain careers and that be, the status quo. I think it'd be better if we find more Black cosplayers, more Black writers. And I'm just saying, because this is me, like I'm African American, I'm Black. So we'd
Right.
have to do our best to support them and get their, products, get their stories seen, get that exposure so that it will get to that high level entertainment. Sure,
Yeah.
we can see more proper representation. I think if you're going to write a character who is not of the same gender
Mhm.
identification or ethnicity, nationality as you,
Mhm.
you have to do your research. There is no if,
Yeah.
ands, or buts. Because
Right.
even now, I'm I'm putting together a teleplay, and the main male lead is Korean.
Mm.
But but online, I have spoken to Korean men, and I've gotten their information, like as in like their opinions, their feedbacks, their feelings, their thoughts on several types of topics,
Mm.
and I'm still gonna keep talking to them and anybody else because it needs to be accurate. I can't just make up a character and think that's okay. Like, no, I need real stories from real people to
Yes.
create a real character. You
Absolutely.
have to do research. You can't cut corners on that. So if somebody wants to make a story about someone who is Black or any other ethnicity, you need to
Yeah.
talk to people who are of that background. Like,
Mhm.
we've seen it. We've seen it in movies. We've seen it in books. It's going to be different because there is a sense of, like, there's a connection that's there that you can't portray because you're not from that. Like, I'm not from South Korea and I am
Yeah.
not Korean. So I have to talk to the like people from that nationality and ethnicity. So I make sure I'm doing this correctly because I don't want to, embarrass anyone.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's fine. Like I don't think it should just be excluded.
Hmm.
If you're gonna do it carefully and do it
Right.
properly. Like that is extremely like anything can go wrong at that point. So like that's not that's not the type of writing that you can just like bullshit.
Yeah.
It's I think though it would be better because the way that I'm approaching the situation is I'm just writing people who just so happen to be from these backgrounds. That
Right.
is a better start because
Mhm.
then you're creating more of a common ground between the characters and you're giving
Yeah.
them more depth. I don't want it to stop at just what they are physically. There's
Yeah.
more to it,
Mhm.
I love cosplay. If I have the money, time, I do it all often. I love cosplay,
Same.
I love games, I love movies, TVs, like, and I dissect all of that. It's more than just me being an African American woman. Like,
Yeah.
I have whole personality that um, I tie into my heritage and into my ethnicity. So
Yes.
I think just kind of starting off your characters as just people and then maybe even like the last thing, like whenever you're doing like a blueprint of writing somebody out, if that's like the last thing, I kind of agree on that notion. Like have that be like at the bottom rung and then develop everything else first so that there isn't so much of an emphasis because then it feels forced and then it goes back to like you're just using this person as a token to come off
Right.
as diverse. Like how sometimes colleges will put a person of color in the brochure and then you step on campus and it's quite the opposite and you're like,
Yeah. Yes.
wasn't that's not in the brochure. It's too much of a shock. So like I wouldn't want that.
Right.
Hopefully if gaming industries are wanting to create, more characters of color, I prefer them to start off as just making it just this is just a person and then you know go from there. Because if you have the personality, then you can kind of fill in that nationality that ethnicity blank with pretty much whatever because not everybody it's not cookie cutter, like I said, can't have um, if you want to have somebody like a person of color in your writing team, I think it'd be best to have them all be from different areas because there's different experiences that everybody has and that's going to develop an even deeper story and deeper character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, example, I love to write and I'm writing like a fantasy novel with some friends and I'm writing for a couple of male characters and honestly I just I try to put myself in their shoes and it's really fun and I mean of course I'll ask like hey am I doing this right you know what I mean but for the most part it feels very natural to just think of their personality and go from there and when you're writing a good character people are people and personality is going to be affected by their background. But that's something that as long as you've done your research and you continue to do your research, you can do that. You can make that basis. I think that it too often um, on the other side of the issue is people who are trying to actually add diversity can end up shooting themselves in the foot artistically by worrying too much about how they're representing you know what I mean? Like you can do that to the point where you've boxed yourself into this corner and you feel like I'm not doing this right and I can't do this, and you've almost like gate kept yourself out of writing these characters that you might really love, but you're just so afraid of it coming off offensive. And you don't have to, I mean, obviously, as you said, like as long as you're doing your research and you're really respecting the demographic that they're representing, the places they come from, the character themselves, you don't have to be worried about it. I think that that might also keep people from adding more diversity is they're afraid to touch it. You know what I mean? They're afraid to do something wrong with it. And of course, that's kind of like on the other end of the issue. Most of the time, it's just getting people to be willing to do it. You know what I mean? Just because they're maybe not aware of the impact that it will have and so I think that that is also like something that can happen. I know that I've been in that place before where it's like, I don't know if I should write this because, I really don't know too much about it. And, but, you ask people who are of that background, who are in that community or demographic, and, almost all of them will say it's fine. You just need to respect the material. You need to respect where they're coming from, and you can write whatever you feel like writing as long as you're doing it respectfully, and that's great. And I think that should encourage more people to add more diversity, and it's definitely needed. So,
Right.
uh, yeah. And as a cosplayer, I know we were talking mostly about gaming, but just just really quickly, like if I could ask, if you're cool with asking about like the cosplay community. I know personally I'm fascinated with that community as well, being a part of it. What is Do you feel like there are hurdles there as well that you'd like to maybe address at a later date? Because I would love to have you back on. You're a fantastic guest. So if you'd like, we can also address that, or if that's not something you're interested in, we don't have to go there. So it's totally up to you, but
Oh no, I love the way that we're able to hear each other out, and
yeah.
we understand where each person's coming from with these with this whole topic in general. So I'd be more than happy to keep talking to you because it doesn't feel awkward. It's not um because sometimes when you're talking to somebody, it's like you're talking to a wall, and it's like you want to be heard and you want to let your feelings and your thoughts be known. But I feel like we've both been pretty receptive to each other's messages, and it's been really
Yeah,
comfortable and fun talking to you. So
that's
as far as
great.
like the cosplay, um, that also ties into with like the gaming industry or the
Yes.
gaming world where there is exclusiveness in there. There are going to be people who think that, certain people cannot cosplay because they don't look like the characters. But to me, cosplay can also be either it's a bit of a spectrum too. It can either be extremely accurate or it can just be an interpretation. It's just the way that it's the flattery behind it. So I love seeing when people have like level cosplays, where they merge two completely different things together, but
Me too.
they form it into something entirely new. Um, like somebody, it was a picture of a guy on Halloween. I wish I could, I knew the name so I can give it credit, but he he was Gomez Adams, and he was also like Selena, the
Oh
singer.
my gosh, I think I've seen that one.
It was
Yes,
together it makes
Selena
Selena Gomez.
Gomez.
Things like that. Like I love stuff like that. People love the Hello Kitty Darth Vader
Yes.
cosplays. Like
Yes. Oh
it's cute
gosh.
little creations. I just there is a whole other topic of also dealing with being black, and I would love to cosplay, but I'm like scared of that backlash. But I also have to remember I gotta ignore that kind of talk because no matter what I do, somebody's going to have some kind of uh, negativity or disagreement on what it is that I think and feel. So, yeah, like that's a whole other topic that we can also get into because and then this stuff goes deep.
Yes.
Like it goes
Yes.
really.
It does, yeah. So we can definitely like do a completely separate interview where we talk more at length about that. And I would be so down because you're awesome. Just on that topic, I'll just add real quick my own, because I personally haven't dealt necessarily with that. But I know that I love cosplaying Harley Quinn. She's so fun. She's one of my favorite characters. And I know that a lot of people cosplay her, but I don't really care. Like it's just so enjoyable. But it really breaks my heart because my sister-in-law, she's Puerto Rican and she's very dark skinned. She's gorgeous skin. But she feels that she can't ever accurately cosplay this character whom she loves. She loves Harley Quinn, and she feels like she can't ever like be an accurate representation. It's like, no, I wish that I could convince her, but no, I think that it's amazing to see people of color cosplaying like like white characters and and all of that. And so I think that it's really cool to see that representation. And I think it would encourage, maybe more people to cosplay outside of that particular boundary. Do you know what I mean? Like as
Right.
long as you love the character. Yeah.
I think like some there is a bit of a confusion when it comes to cosplaying where I see a lot of cosplay with anime, and I grew up watching a lot of anime, and I've read manga when I was like in high school. So when you're seeing the cartoon depiction of these characters, they are going to have fair skin, but
Hmm.
they're still drawn like these are just animated versions of Japanese or just East Asian people. So
Right.
even then, it's like they're not even white. They have the skin color, but they're still a person of color, and that's
Yeah.
another. And that's what I think where some people get confused because
Right.
yeah, it is sometimes when a white person is cosplaying a character, it the resemblance can be very uncanny, and I've seen it. I'm not going to deny it because that's a lot of
Right.
great artistry put into it and a lot of hard work. But I would
Mhm.
never assume that that character is like the cartoon character is white. Like even then, like I said, most of the cosplay I've seen has been anime, and like all the anime that I've watched, like they're literally saying like, "Oh, I live in Osaka. I live in over here," and
Yeah.
um, it's like, "Oh, they're Japanese." But I think it should be still like left open. It's always fun to see different people, especially like with Sailor Moon. I love it when I see like groups of women or like when an artist takes all the Sailor Scouts and they make them some like from different ethnicities, and I think that's so badass.
Mhm.
If you want to make it, it's hard to say like what makes it accurate. Like these, first of all, made up characters that don't even exist.
Right.
So accuracy is
Exactly.
kind of like the most you can get accurate with is the costume and the detail of it of the accessories.
Yeah.
That's about as far as it's gonna go. Because
Right.
like you get mad about somebody that never existed. Like that's
Mhm.
why I'm not so hung up on when people want to recast like a Superman or a Batman or someone. And I'm like, this person was never real. It's kind of open to interpretation in a way. But as long as like you try to keep the integrity of the original material, cool. I think it's coming into 2020, people got to get over the you might be too dark for that, or you might be too curvy for that. You might be too this, you might be too that. Shut up. Like, I want to do something
Right.
look good because
Oh
I
my
know like
gosh.
I want to, and like eventually I'll get there to where maybe I'll even try to cosplay because I know my sister and I were really into making like our own costumes for Halloween, and
Yeah.
that even like I get in a way that's kind of cosplaying. I was Laura Croft one year when I was in middle school, and
Yeah.
that was fun. But I was a little worried because I think I told my family, but like I played Tomb Raider a lot growing up too, and I was like, I want to be Laura Croft, but I was scared because at the time my hair was shorter, and so I had to put in extensions. And
Hmm.
there's already deal with people making fun of black women wearing extensions, and I know I look mixed, and I'm not, but in Texas, like I still dealt with racism. And so I was a little worried, going out trick or treating and somebody's going to look at me like, why are you Laura Croft? You're not white. But it
Yeah.
was like, and then like as a kid, like I even had those thoughts of someone's going to make fun of me or someone's going to, horribly criticize me because I'm not
Right.
white like her. But, now if I wanted to do it again, I will and I can. So more
Yes.
people get a sense of confidence.
I love that. I think that that's absolutely true, especially like something that I definitely know I think most people have struggled with is the accuracy of a character's, like you said, the curvaceousness or the size of the character. I think that, that's right there is a great argument for not worrying too much about accuracy because these characters are drawn disproportionately
Yeah.
small or disproportionately curvy, or like there's no way that a human being can realistically be like Jessica Rabbit, or you know what I mean, or something. I mean, there's some characters, most characters honestly, are not shaped like a normal human being. So there's no way. I mean, our eyes aren't that big, our mouths aren't that small, like most people are not like that without extensive plastic surgery. And I think that it's just kind of silly to obsess over accuracy in that sense. Like, it's valid to feel down about that, obviously. Like, we've all felt down about not being like thin enough, I think, to cosplay a character that we loved accurately, right? And those feelings are valid, but it's when you really break it down, it's kind of like we're worrying about representing someone who doesn't exist, like you said. And so I think it's comforting to remember that like this character doesn't actually exist. There's no way to represent any of these characters accurately as a human being. So like we might as well
Exactly.
just have fun and enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So.
Seriously, when I turned 21, my best friend, he got me and him tickets to this anime convention in Austin. Um, and it was so much fun. Like, I loved seeing all the cosplay costumes. I dressed up. I wasn't anybody specific. I just freaking dressed up, and that was fun too.
Nice. Yeah.
Luckily, the crowd there was very inclusive. Like, everyone was, I love that. You look great. And, all of this. I saw a lot of young people who were, what is it? Like, they gender swapped characters,
Oh yeah.
or it would be like a guy who's in drag in a character, or somebody who was like transitioning, and they were able to like look the way that they want to look, and it was really beautiful to see that, and I loved it. Like, that was my first anime, like, convention. It was small, it wasn't like Comic-Con and big and vast, but it was still something really amazing. It was a really beautiful and fun experience that I had, because, like I said, everyone was so polite and was so fun. Like, it wasn't a lot of black people there, which is okay, but I didn't feel like that, like, I didn't, no one made me, like, even in that area where like I knew I could recognize a character and knew where they were from. No one made me feel outcasted the way,
Yeah.
their cases
Yeah.
they can and they will.
Yeah.
um, but like, I'm really hoping people get to that point to where you just appreciate the artistry of somebody putting together that costume, and that's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, definitely. Thank you so much. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or are you comfortable with wrapping up?
I'm totally comfortable with wrapping up. I'm gonna try to come up with some more material with, like, if the next thing you want to talk about is cosplay, I'm 100% down for it,
Awesome.
because yeah, we're gonna open up that can of worms.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'll just
Thank
do an outro real quick. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on, Angelique, and I really, really appreciate it. I cannot wait to interview you again, or in this case, to have a conversation with you again. Thank you so, so much. I hope you have a great day.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
bye. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye bye.
Bye.